This is Jamie Drummond with Good Food Revolution. I'm here with James Murphy. Hello, James. How are you today?
Very good.
Now, you're
I didn't know it was going to be video.
You're back in Toronto. You were playing here on Tuesday. Oh, we have our wines arriving. You were playing here on Tuesday with your band, and you chose to come back to. What do we have here?
What's this?
This is the Henry of Pelham.
This is the Henry of Pelham Bacchanal? Something incredibly local for Mr. Murphy.
It's awesome. It's like 20 minutes away.
I guess I'll edit that out. When you were growing up, James,
Yes.
and you come from New Jersey, I believe,
Yes.
how important was food and wine in your life?
It was not important. I come from a suburban Irish American family, which means food is terrible. A lot of processed cheese, Wonder Bread, boiled things,
Boiled things.
hot dogs, SpaghettiOs. It's pretty bad food, basically.
And at which point in your life did you actually move away from that kind of rut you were in with regards to food and, I'm going to say wine again?
Well, I tried to eat. I was vegetarian when I was a teenager, just because.
Why were you a vegetarian?
I don't know, because everybody in punk bands is vegetarian, and
Were you straight edge as well?
no, it's not straight edge. But it just seemed like I wasn't giving up anything because the food was really bad. So it was like out of the frying pan to the fire, like crappy meat or crappy vegetables. Although we had a garden. There's a couple things that we did really well. My parents had a great garden. My mother was a really good baker, but we had an amazing garden. So the tomatoes I grew up with, what are now heirloom tomatoes, et cetera, were just the tomatoes that we grew in my backyard. New Jersey's incredibly good soil. Incredible peas. I used to, as children, there was 4 of us, we always each had to garden a certain amount. I had to weed a quarter of the garden. I always planted myself right in the pea patch because I could just eat them while gardening. We did a cantaloupe. We had peach trees. Carrots. I think the carrots we grew were boring, but that was from the seeds we chose. Whereas the tomatoes were incredible. Did a lot of peppers, which I never really got into. Green beans, scallions. Like it was just nice growing our own vegetables. It just seemed like a normal thing to do. Now I think people do that less. It's like, but that was just normal. I think my parents did it out of like a, immigrant economic brain, like sort of like you grow your own vegetables. It's like, why pay for them? You can have them in the backyard. When you have these kids, they should do something.
And when did you, did you actually have some sort of a point in your life where you started enjoying food as opposed to...
I had a bunch of different points in my life. When I went out with this girl whose stepfather was Tuscan, and he hated me, and I hated him. But he was a really amazing cook, a Tuscan cook. And I started finding that I could cook. Like, I started finding that I was like...
I didn't know you were a cook.
I was okay. I have problems with a couple of things. I bought the CIA. My parents passed away. I used to call my mother for, like, how long do I cook this? Because I'm bad with, like, how long do I cook this meat? How long do I do that for?
Is it not just until it's done?
You never know. I mean, I think it's like there's a certain amount of confidence you have to have with like timing meat and temperaturing meat and stuff like that I just never had. I'm good with sauces. I was good with tastes, and so like cooking with this Italian dude, I felt like I started becoming comfortable like with flavor, and I learned to cook from him, and became a pretty good cook. We would fight, and my girlfriend at the time and her mother knew that it was going to be a good meal when there was a lot of yelling. Because then we would be contested. I remember we had the great mushroom battle, where he wanted to do the mushrooms in one way, I wanted to do the mushrooms in another way, and those were the night. And that was the night we'd come out both angry and put to me like, we're not saying who made what, but you have to tell us which one's better. So we'd get into these battles, and that was when the food would get really good. And then after that, I split up with her, and I was very, 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 very broke as a musician, and I found that I could make a couple things really simply that I liked better than the shitty food I could buy.
Which were what?
I made a really simple pasta sauce that's so simple but so delicious, and I could use it for steak, and I could use it for anything. It was just whole peeled nice tomatoes, Italian tomatoes, like mashed with a potato masher, a whole onion a Spanish onion, sliced off the top, peel this the outer layer, slice the top and bottom off, set in the bottom, and a stick of butter. And I just let it reduce for 8 hours. And the amount of tanginess, and a lot of fresh rosemary. And the amount of tanginess, that was it. There was no salt, there was no anything else in it. Because the natural salts and sugars of the tomatoes were enough, and the salt and the butter was enough, and the onion was something that you could slice up at the end that was almost like you could spread it on bread at the end when you pulled the onion up from the bottom. And you didn't want the onion to break up and get part of the sauce. The sauce was really like a very light sauce.
So you actually took the onion out.
After when you're done, the onion would become to kind of put on you get a little crock with a little bit of the sauce, and you seal the onion, and that was hot, and you could spread that on bread. And it was almost like spreading hot garlic.
So no garlic in there.
And it made me really happy. And then I started getting into salt, because I realized that I could buy the nicest salt imaginable, and it would still only increase my annual budget by about $12. No, because it's like, other than that, it's like you couldn't buy the nicest wine, because that's, you couldn't buy the nicest meats, but I could buy the nicest salt. And that was sort of the first thing that got me excited.
Are you serious? You got into salt?
Salt was the first thing I got into, basically, really. Because the difference, because when I had like really nice fleur de sel versus like iodized sea salt, and the first time I tasted, like when you oversalt something with bad salt, it's just like a horror of chemicals. Whereas I can just take fleur de sel and put it on my tongue, and it's good on its own. Like I could have like arugula with a little salt, a little olive oil, and I'd be happy. Like it was enough. Salt and vinegar, those are the other two things I got into.
What was the second recipe after that sauce?
Just having nice salt.
Oh.
Like literally, and buying tuna steak and making tuna salad, but making my own mayonnaise.
Making your own mayonnaise?
Making
That's
my own
something
mayonnaise.
I've screwed up so many times.
Yeah, I've
myself.
gotten really good at it now. But now I actually make it with a very little of my own mayonnaise, mostly with olive oil.
You were mentioning garlic. Your father had an aversion to garlic.
My father had an aversion to anything that was not just, he couldn't eat garlic or onions or rice. He liked fettuccine alfredo. Was about
How could anybody have a problem with rice? What was the?
He fought in Korea.
Okay.
So everything that he hated came down to the army. We never camped. I camped for 22 months in Korea. What the hell I want to go camping for? My cousin had a power yacht. Want to go on the boat? Took a boat 22 days over and 21 days back from Korea. What the hell I want to go on the boat for? Buffet at a fancy restaurant or a really nice wedding, like a really elegant buffet. Wouldn't eat it. Why? Ate buffet 22 months in Korea. What the hell I want to eat buffet for? Everything.
They had a lot of buffets in Korea, I guess.
Well, that's what you mess hall. It made him think of the mess hall. It made him think of going up and getting your food. Just made him think of being in the army.
Now,
I don't think he had a great time.
Moving on from the food you had growing up, you've had a chance to try, to eat in some very interesting restaurants all over the world.
Yes.
Since I've known you, which has been a fair bit now, I've always thought of you as being someone who's had a bit of a palate, and I'd like to hear from you your most amazing food experiences that you've had as you've been traveling around.
That's hard to do. I'll have to give it a second. I mean, there's a couple that might not be the best food experiences, but were kind of the changers. I think the first time I went to Brazil and had like one of those crazy meat, freakouts in Brazil where they just keep coming and bringing you incredible meat, and me not realizing that meat had so much variety in it. I think that was a real mind blower. I think being in Japan and learning, like eating Japanese basic food, I really liked. I started what you get exported is like chicken teriyaki or sushi, but when I'm there, I love ramen. I love good ramen so much, and like the different kinds of ramen, the shio and the shoyu, and there's like finding different places that are really obsessed with it. I've grown to really love. I love tonkatsu, like a really good tonkatsu places.
I don't. Excuse my ignorance. I don't actually know what that is.
Tonkatsu is breaded pork cutlet with like a very specific kind of sweet brown sauce over rice, and the places that are the best at it are very often very small, and that's all they do. They serve green tea, miso soup, rice, tonkatsu. And if they serve anything else, they're not a real tonkatsu place in Japan. And friends of mine are very vehement about it. Like people will get into they'll be like, oh no, my place is the best. And I've had to watch them all go to each other's places and find new. Cause it's almost like being obsessed with a team, a sports team. Like you're just blindly, ignorantly obsessed with your tonkatsu, the same way people are with ramen there. There's so many. The first time I went to Paris in 1996, and I had duck there because I never liked duck.
Why wouldn't you like duck?
The duck that you get in America is the Long Island style duck, and the meat isn't as dark. It's a different animal than like a duck you get in France. And I always found it to be like a slightly gamey chicken, and I wasn't that obsessed with it, wasn't that interested. But the incredibly rich, dark, oily duck that I would get in France, I was like, why do I like this so much more? And then I realized it's just a different animal. In a lot of ways, people prefer the Long Island duck, like that fatter, a goosier duck. But I like the kind of dense, sort of like I like an old chicken. Like when I was in Racine in Paris, they made old chicken, which is just like an older chicken. And the meat is very, very different than what, normally.
You have to cook it entirely different.
Right, well, we're used to thinking of a chicken as a certain thing. It's like an older adolescent chicken. Like that's what we eat. No, but you know what I mean? We eat like these chickens that are like always the same age, same plumpness. It's like pretty much the same thing all the time. But you never think of like eating like an old chicken. But like
those are normally broilers that they.
Oh my god! This Racine in Paris.
If you cook it in
That's
the
a
right,
life
manner,
changer.
it can work.
It was incredible, denser, more like duck, more gamey.
How often do you cook at home?
Very rarely because I'm never home. But I want to change that.
You're getting a new kitchen.
I'm getting a new
installed,
table. I'm getting not a kitchen installed. That sounds very posh. I'm getting a large section of barn planks, salvaged barn planks, turned into a big kitchen table because of a trip I recently had to Paris where I went to Le Vervelet, one of my favorite wine stores, and bought a dozen bottles of some of my favorite wine that you just can't get. I can't get in New York. And it's very rare to say.
It's hard to say you couldn't get anything in New York.
But there's just wine.
Good ecstasy being one of the things
Yeah.
you can't get in New York. Anyway, that's another matter.
No, but it's true. Like you can't get the white Masavecchias because they don't travel well. You can't get the red Prairie Roque.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, by the time you got that stuff, I could get that for €80 at Le Vervelet, which is an expensive wine in France. But in New York, that's a $600, $700 bottle of Bourgogne, and it's my favorite. That's my favorite.
Let's hear the
wine.
pronunciation on that again.
Bourgogne, Burgundy, Bourgogne, Burgundy, crescent roll.
That's good. That's good.
But I will say Racine salad if you want a life-changing experience. The fucking vegetable salad at Racine of raw vegetables, which I had a year ago.
Sorry, where's this?
Racine in Paris, on
Okay.
Passage du Panorama, little tiny place.
Yep.
And they get vegetables. I don't remember names, but they get vegetables from there's a very famous chef who has a handful of Michelin stars in various places, who has a garden in the north of France, like in the north of Paris, like an incredible, legendary garden where his vegetables come from. And only 2 other places can get vegetables from him, and Racine was one of them. Because it was one of his proteges that ran Racine. He would ride his bike up and pick the vegetables. And the salad hit the table. And you know when you have like broiled pork, or you have something that smells like it tastes, and it overwhelms you. And that's always the blessing of meat. You smell it coming before you taste it. These vegetables hit the table, and I literally had the kind of salivary experience that you get with pork or meat or something, like steak or duck, or where it smelled so strongly of like beets and carrots, these red carrots, that it totally changed my mind about vegetables. Like they at that moment they stopped being a secondary thing, and I became obsessed with I need to stop being in this band and build a roof garden in Brooklyn, and I need to ingratiate myself with this chef and get vines and cuttings and seeds, because the difference that stuff makes is literally shocking.
Now, your palate seems to be reasonably open, as in you're quite an adventurous eater. Are there things that you wouldn't eat?
I didn't eat anything growing up. I was a very non-adventurous eater. And I whenever I meet my nieces and nephews who don't eat things, I always tell them, you're lucky. That means you get to enjoy them later. Because I've just learned to enjoy pretty much anything. What do I not like? I tend not to like things that are metallic. meaning I don't like salmon. It's a strange thing to draw a line at when I eat cod sperm sacs. To draw your line at salmon is sort of a strange place, but the most innocuous fish that appears in every wedding. But I don't like the iron, the metallic taste.
Okay. The kind of mineral kind of thing that comes through?
No, I like. I don't quite understand because I'm trying to figure out what it is I don't like, because I don't like if liver has too high of an irony taste. I don't like it. Like when the liver becomes too penny tasting.
Yeah.
I tend coppery. I don't like that metallic taste. But it's also, I think I've learned that my palate is a little bit sweet, meaning that like I love espresso, but I prefer like half of a spoon of sugar and a little, steamed milk.
We were talking about this the other night when we were speaking about beer, and we were talking about all those like...
I don't like overly hoppy beer.
Yeah, like things that are actually unpleasant and bitter to the taste.
For some reason I love Fernet Branca, which is something that's pretty bitter. But I hated gin until recently. I can only like certain gins if they're too much like, I don't like grapefruits. Like grapefruit is a taste that,
You find it quite unpleasant.
I find it very unpleasant. It's a taste that like, it's certainly not me being like small, closed-minded about things. I mean, I eat a lot of weird stuff, but grapefruit is one of those tastes I don't understand how anyone likes. It's just, there's a type of bitterness that my palate doesn't agree with. Whereas Pat and I, because Pat, the drummer, and I eat together all the time, and we both, love food in different ways. But Pat drinks black coffee, and I drink like a lightly sugared cappuccino. And
I was going to make a comment there about you being a big poof.
yeah, no, but Pat's palate and I are really aligned, except for his tends to lean towards the bitter, and mine tends to lean. Like he'll say something's too sweet before I will. And I'll say something's too bitter before he will, but it's really right on the outside peripheries.
How much do you know about the concept of super tasters and the like?
I don't know much. I do know DJ McNanny, but that's all.
So
you know DJ, right?
Yeah, of course.
I believe he's a super taster.
Well, there's a difference between a super taster, as in he's a fantastic taster, but a super taster is someone who has a larger concentration. Sorry, a larger
little
concentration
nodules in
of
a
the
certain
little
area.
pupillae, on their tongue, which allows them to. They are actually physiologically superior when it comes to tasting certain sensations within the mouth.
Right.
But the downside to that
Become
is
hypersensitive to certain things.
yes, so you cannot really handle bitterness or spice. How are you with spice?
I like spice. I'm not one of those guys that's like, bring it on, you know what I mean? But I do like heat. I don't like it when it burns my tongue and it makes it, it's almost like a noise. If it's too loud and I can't hear anything else, I don't like that. I like it when it's integrated. I do like when I was a kid, there was a bunch of different buffalo wing places where I grew up, and I hated all but one. And one was just as hot as all the others, but the spice was integrated into the butter. As long as it's part of the taste, I like it. When it's separate from the taste, it sounds like I mix up my
No, you
experiences all the time.
I was just in London and went for a Chinese Szechuan place, and I read it was going to be one of the top places in London. As soon as all the food arrived, and it was quite expensive, my girlfriend tasted one of the dishes, tasted it, and she's like, "Oh shit, you're not going to be able to eat this." It was so hot, but somehow it
was integrated well enough.
The dish was so complex. Like the heat wasn't the only element in the dish.
Well, that to me is like the thing that for me it's all about the heat. If it's detached from the rest of the tastes, I don't enjoy it.
You get food. I love this.
But that's the same with it's the same with sound. It's like if you have a treble that's separated from the rest of the music, then all you're doing is hearing that and it's distracting you. If it's attached to the rest of the sound, it's quite lovely. It's the same concept to me.
All to do with balance, isn't it?
Yeah,
in some way.
But I also like playful stuff where stuff sticks out a little bit. If that's part of the fun, you know what I mean. It shouldn't just be balanced, always elegant. Like that's one thing I've loved about wine lately. Is like finding things that are a little bit wrong. I do like it when I put my face in a glass of wine and it smells like eggs, and then you taste it. It doesn't have any of that flavor. Like when it tastes like dirt, but it smells like eggs. And I don't mind that playfulness and stuff. I don't need everything to be perfectly elegant. It's the same with fashion. It's like, yeah, of course you want a suit that's perfectly tailored, but it's pretty funny when you see David Byrne in a huge suit. Like, part of the playfulness is like
a suit that gets gradually bigger as well.
as the yeah, exactly.
Couple more questions. Be very quick with these. Food on the road is notoriously bad.
Yes, we have a couple of solutions.
Tell me.
We bring a rice cooker, and we get really nice rice, and we get really nice Japanese sides, we get really good nori.
Are you serious?
Yes, we bring a rice cooker, and we bring our own nori and our own sesame seeds and sesame oils and like condiments. I try to also get really nice olive oil. We get a bunch of condiments we bring with us so that we can make, I can make my tuna salad, which is like nice tuna, like line caught tuna, olive oil, a little bit of mayonnaise, capers, salt and pepper, and Coleman's mustard.
Are you serious?
For the kick, and then I eat that with lettuce, and that's just always good and makes me feel good. And we eat rice, and we eat a lot of rice, like nice rice on the bus, because it just makes us feel better. Whereas a bunch of like shitty sandwiches and wraps and things
all
like
the stuff
that,
that's put on as writers,
especially when it's like wanky fake good food wraps, like smoked mozzarella and sun-dried tomato, like a bunch of decent food ruined. That's a bunch of what you get. And
you said you had a second solution to all of this. Is that coming to Toronto and coming out with me?
Well, no, but it's like we do try to eat. Yeah, it's like we do try to eat. I'm sorry we missed the other night. It was just impossible to show.
You apologized to Corey Vitello from the Harvard Room.
I'm sorry, really, Corey. It was so hard for us. Everyone was really sick and exhausted, and we couldn't get it together. The sound check took too long. We couldn't have eaten, but we would have eaten right up till we played, and then we would have played like this. Oh God, oh Jesus. Because I know what eating with him was like, and it's not a half-hearted affair.
Last question for you. When you think of the expression good food, and for me, beer and wine is food.
Yep.
Obviously. What is good food for you?
I mean, it can be a bunch of things. It can be comfort food from your childhood, but it can be a new experience of really good food. I think for me, it's just like eating things that change you a little bit. Either change you or remind you of yourself. Like that to me is something I really like. You're either tasting things that are new and you have to make decisions about, or you're tasting things that like remind you of a good centered part of yourself. Like there's wines I like that I just taste because I'm like, this is my normal drinking wine and I like it and it makes me feel at home. Or like a coffee does that. Like a certain espresso makes me feel at home. But just not this detached experience of shitty food. I mean, I've been obsessed with suburban sprawl and with a loathing of it, and I wasn't thinking about it in terms of food. I was always thinking about it in terms of just like, everyone has to have a McMansion, and everyone has to have 2 cars, and everyone has to have 5 iPods.
Do you have one of those yet?
What?
A McMansion?
I don't have it. I have a rented apartment in Brooklyn. But I wanted to buy land around a small town in Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania? Why Pennsylvania?
Because it's close to New York, and it has different kinds of. It's not as expensive as Connecticut. It's not as overdeveloped as New York. And it has like almost no rules stopping sprawl. So like the area around Philadelphia is just sprawl. It's a nightmare. So I wanted to ring a small town as a place to retire to and make things. But I also wanted to grow, set up some really good gardens. And
are you serious?
Yeah, set up a really nice little farm and try and work with a local public school to be like, look, I'll donate anything we grow, but all these kids that have an opportunity to do a bunch of things with their lives should come and learn how to grow their own food a little bit. Not as like because growing up in America where I grew up, you had a choice. I grew up in an agricultural town, and you chose to be a farmer or to go to college. You chose to separate your life. Either you're going to be a farmer, and most likely you're going to grow soy, or you're going to go to college. And I thought that was a real crime because I was lucky enough to be raised by parents who you learn to grow your own food. Like, you learn to grow tomatoes. Even though they couldn't cook to save their lives, we knew how to garden. Like, I knew how to till and mulch, and I knew how to, make the soil better. And
I never knew this about you, James.
Yeah, it was just part of what we grew up with. My parents are old. My father was born in 1931. He's a Depression baby. So like, you know, they they fucking knew how to grow food, and I just wanted to be like, you know, to make their experience of growing food not something that's like subjugated, not like, oh, you know, you're not going to go to college, you're going to be a farmer. You know, I wanted it to be a little more integrated into like, you know, understanding where your food comes from and enjoying it, and you know, and if that was an experiment that worked in a small town, it'd be a kind of an interesting model for how, you know, things could be a little bit different. I mean, imagine if like your local landowners and people, instead of just paying taxes for a public school, actually donated some land, and the school had a farm, and people grew up knowing what real vegetables were, didn't grow up knowing what industrial vegetables were, like grew up knowing what a tomato was. I mean, that's the thing for me. I can't eat tomatoes. You know, the rest of the vegetables we grew were okay, but the tomatoes we grew were literally New Jersey legendary tomatoes. Like, you could just eat them without anything on them. You didn't even have to salt them. And I can't eat these hothouse tomatoes. And we also had wild strawberries. And I can't eat strawberries anymore because they just don't have any taste. They're these big, bulbous, pale things that look great dipped in shitty chocolate, but in fact are just inedible. It just tastes like clay to me. When you had those little fingertip-sized red wild strawberries. So,
Mr. Murphy, it's been a pleasure spending lunch with you. It's been a pleasure having lunch with you and having a chance to chat with you. Thank you very much for taking the time out with Good Food Revolution.
my pleasure.
We'll see you very soon, perhaps in New York or perhaps somewhere else.
Yes.
Take care, sir.
Hell yeah.